if it's retro wave or Stranger Things, or if those two had a baby, and that's what this is, but it's cool. Whatever you just saw a minute ago, I like it, and it's fun, and it's cool, and that's what I want to talk about in this video, which I might add is sponsored by Motion Array, but we will get to that down the line. So what you are seeing here is a kind of a variety of these 80s retro style clips of just doing different things throughout this living room. So I want to break down not only the lighting, but also kind of what it took to get this particular look, what went into that. So I'm going to break down the lighting in that as well in this video of a few of the different clips that we are seeing here. Now, to get this look, it took some time for sure, because I am not in the art department. I am bad at set design, so I was like, what the heck do I do? I walked around stores and I was like, I don't even know where to start. So the first step that I took was to take to Pinterest and Instagram and stuff like that and start to look up like 80s retro or retro wave aesthetic, vaporwave aesthetic, stuff like that, to start to give myself an idea of some kind of like staple props that I would see there. There's like the lava lamps, plasma balls, those old box TVs, DeLorean, with stuff that was relevant in the time. So I was like, okay, that's the kind of props I want to look for. But then I also noticed the similarity in color palettes between all of these kind of aesthetics. You start to see a lot of deep pinks, cyans, some kind of like greens as well, some deep tungstens. So I started to see this repeating color palette, and I knew that's the direction I wanted to go when I had motivation, being this vaporwave kind of era, or this retro wave era essentially. So after that, I went to antique stores, I went to thrift stores, I looked for all the props I think I needed, things that might fit, things that are just weird and quirky that would have been relevant in the 80s, and it took me a lot of different trips to do so, but I brought those back, threw them into my apartment, and I was like, hey, things look pretty darn good. So essentially the set design I don't want to touch much on because I'm not a pro at that, but what you see there is kind of like this 80s aesthetic that I'd gathered through Instagram and Pinterest and antique stores and thrift stores and so on and so forth. And then coming to the wardrobe side of things, I will be totally transparent with you when I say that I kind of blanked on it. Yeah, I didn't think much on it until Erica, the day of. Erica was on BTS, and then Millie was the talent. So they came and they already had it covered with much more than I could have asked for. So a big thank you, not only with wardrobe, but definitely added on a big thank you to Erica and Millie for, making this work. So with the set design done, the wardrobe pretty much in place, it's time to talk about the lighting, which is kind of the meat of it. And lighting is where things always get fun and creative. And honestly, I wanted to go fun and creative with this. I wanted to go 80s, but also with this mix of vaporwave, like realism. So that's the direction that we're going and what I want to talk about. So the first shot that I want to break down is this establishing why. This is where you can ultimately see the entire lighting setup. That will stay consistent throughout the video. And you've got this whole scene with RGB lighting, and then Millie there laying on the floor, drawing out this art. And we kind of took this very untraditional approach as to how we did light the scene. I didn't start with just like a key light and shape everything around that. We didn't have a pre-light or any direction that we wanted to go with. So I actually started with this window light that you see there. I knew I wanted this kind of just glowing wall of color. You see that a lot in these vaporwave graphics and this 80s era. It's just like a glowing door of some sort of color or a window. So I was like, how am I gonna do that? And I started to think, I was like, well, I can't, it's glass. I can't just shoot something out there. So I was like, I need something that's kind of opaque, but will glow essentially if lights into it, like a frosty material. And I decided to go with like this painter's tarp, what they'll throw down, to keep painters from making a mess, because it's got this like opaque frosty material. And I was like, this is perfect. So I gaff taped that up to the window, tested it out by shining some light into it, and I saw that it was pretty frosty and I thought it was gonna work. So going into the first light that we added here, this is on that magenta side of the door. I use an Aperture Nova P300. Now I took that and I put it on a Mathellini clamp right on this railing because it's tight. I didn't want to stand in there. Threw it on that clamp and I just shot that into the window. Now I set that to magenta and I thought it looked fantastic, but I kind of wanted this bleeding gradient of almost like a sunset into a deep orange. So to contrast that, on the left side of this window out there on another Mathellini, I use an Amaran F22C, and I went into Sidus and just set this to like a really deep orangey yellow kind of feel. And then you can really start to see this gradient coming through this window. And it actually acted as a great ambient light throughout the entire room, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later down the line as well. And both of these lights I set really to about like 1% or so. I didn't want them to be casting through this frost, acting as like light going through diffusion. I just wanted this very ambient glow on the material itself, so I set them to just about 1%, something very dim. And I used panel lights because I knew that they'd be a larger spread. If I used something that's more directional, like a spotlight mount or something like that, it would have a very strong hot spot in the middle of this diffusion material, this frost, and I knew I didn't want that. So I knew a panel would give me the largest spread of light across this whole 12-foot or so window. Now the majority of the rest of the lights are kind of what you see in frame as these in-frame practicals. So I want to hone in on how you see Millie on the floor there. You see this really warm desk lamp that is just on the floor. So I originally had that on the TV stand, and I didn't like where it was. I was like, well, my eye's wandering everywhere except for Millie. So I took that floor lamp, set it on the floor, and I had that casting on her work, her artwork, as well as up on her face. So that's bringing the viewer's eye essentially to that spot in the image. Now in that light, I used an Aperture B7C bulb, and I brought this down to something really deep and warm, like a 2500 Kelvin on this Aperture bulb, and I had it just at about 100%. And then one more Aperture bulb that I added, since we're on the topic, you can see frame left on that side stand, there's a lamp as well, and that's a cyan blue setup that's going on in there. So I took one more B7C and put it in there, and I set it to cyan because I wanted to start introducing this cooler side of this color spectrum. Now, to balance that on each side of the frame, I saw it in the TV stand, especially in this shot, I wanted to add this really cool glow that matched this other cyan blue kind of concept. So I took two Amaran T2C tubes and I put it on the top shelf and the bottom shelf in there just to keep this same color glow coming out of the TV stand. And then since I've got this kind of like wire mesh on the front of it, I was like, I want this glow similar to how we had that glowing window. So I just took parchment paper, like baking paper that was white, and I stuck that onto the inside of this TV stand doors. So then when the T2Cs are bouncing in and around in there, it's just creating this really ambient glow, especially where you see in shots further down the line in this shoot. So we're getting to the end here. There's two other lights that I added, and both of which are actually tube lights. You can see on frame left, you've got this magenta gradient kind of going up the wall, and all I did for that was just take an Amaran T4C tube, and I set that straight on its back, shooting straight up on that shelf, hidden behind the cameras and the plants and whatever was up there, just raking as a gradient up the wall to fill in a little bit more shadow area there and create a little bit more visual interest. And then just at a frame on frame left, I was looking at this living room table, this coffee table, and I was like, there's cool props on it, but it's really in the dark. A lot of shadow area, and I was like, I want to bring a little bit, not too much, just subtle attention to this there. And all I used to add in this little subtle glow was a new Aperture tube light that is coming soon, so stay tuned for that. And I was playing around with it, and I set it on a stand and just kept this very ambient glow, matching that cyan that we're already seeing in the TV stand and in that light bulb on frame left. And I just set it to cyan, just subtly casting some sort of light on the coffee table, filling in a little bit of the shadow area with these props. So there's a lot going on here and a lot of different colors going on, but I want to break this down to a little bit more, you know, a digestible form factor. So essentially what we've got the key light, which is this floor lamp on Millie, creating this tungsten kind of home around her. And then around the entire scene, we're having this triadic color palette of like some pinks, some cyans, and some deep tungstens, all just filling in pools of shadow area. So we're just creating a balance of color throughout the scene and also a balance of exposure between the highlights and the shadows, as we would really any other scene. So it's not like all these colors need to be intimidating. We've essentially just got this simple scene where we're filling in pools of light. Now this lighting setup was pretty universal, quite honestly, between all of the different shots. We did make some modifications shot to shot, which I do want to get into. But before we dive into that, I want to talk about today's sponsor for the day, which is Motion Array. So if you're not quite familiar with what Motion Array is, essentially it is an unlimited download marketplace for all of your video making needs. And it's membership based, so once you sign up for your subscription, you've got access to all of the 700,000 plus assets that they have to offer, whether it's templates, stock video, music, whatever it takes to make your videos better, quicker is what Motion Array has to offer. And there's no hidden fee, so it's not like once you sign up, the bigger the project you're working up, the more expensive things get. No, you've got access to everything that there is to offer immediately. And I was just going through, I was looking through their templates and their assets, and that's when I saw that retro VHS kind of template that you saw in the beginning, and I'm not a graphics guy. Don't know anything about graphics, but I saw this template for After Effects to plug and play, and I was like, oh my god, I can do so much cool retro stuff with that. let's give it a shot. So it's really what inspired this whole video essentially. And it was so easy to just bring into After Effects, tweak a few things, and it looks like this really professional graphic. So Motion Array has a lot of different assets that help your workflow, adding your production value, making it look great. You can use it for free. You won't get access to everything, but you can do a free trial and get access to hundreds of their assets. Or if you sign up using the link I put down below, you can even get $50 off your annual subscription. So all the information for Motion Array is going to be down below, but without further ado, let's get back into this lighting breakdown. So we saw the establishing wide of Millie drawing on the floor. Now I wanted to move in first to this tight. That was the next shot I want to talk about. And essentially, we only changed two different things. All of the ambience practicals, the window light outside, that stayed the same. But as far as the key light, that floor lamp, that tungsten floor lamp, it was very hard. It was very sharp because it's such a small point source. So shining right on her, it gave me some, I don't know, I just didn't like it. It put a bad taste in my mouth. So I was like, how can I change this? I don't have time to bring in a whole new lighting setup. But instead, what I did, it had this like articulating head on it. So I just took some unbleached muslin and I set that on the floor because for this shot, you can't see what she's drawing on. So I took that unbleached muslin, set it right on the floor, and then I took this B7C bulb in that lamp fixture and I just cast it down off of that. So now instead of hitting her directly, very hard and sharp, it's bouncing off of this large unbleached source, creating this very subtle ambient look on her face from bouncing off of muslin. So that's what I did for the key light, just to create a little bit more soft glow. And I like how it's got this very nice underglow as well, kind of coming from like bouncing off the floor. I just think it's got a very great look on her facial structure and in her eyes as well. So now that was that one light that we had changed. And since we were moving in tight, I wanted to bring in this rim light that you see here on her frame left shoulder. And really what I did for that is take that MT Pro that was over frame left, cyan, and I brought that back over just over her shoulder, just to rake her shoulder, rake her hairline, and bring her back out from the background. It's kind of motivated by that cyan bulb that you see kind of on the back wall from that lamp on the side stand. So essentially nothing else had changed. Everything stayed exactly how it was, but I just, you know, augmented the light and changed it a little bit just to make it look a little bit more pleasing on the tights, because we can move in. We do have that ability to move lights in as we move the camera. So another shot with her, the symmetrical shot with the Rubik's Cube. One, you can already see that TV stand glowing just from the parchment paper and the T2C tubes that are in there. So that looks fantastic, but we didn't do anything. We didn't bring in any lights from the side. That window light again stays the same, but you can see that the main kind of mobile light that we've got here is this B7C bulb and this white floor light. So what we had first was her sitting upright playing with the Rubik's Cube, and then as she was, you know, fidgeting with it more, she came to this laying down position and moved in toward the light. So now when she comes into the light, you see the exposure on her face get a lot more warm and tungsten and bright and well lit. And then also motivating for when we move into this really tight of her focus on the Rubik's Cube, she's coming into the light there as well. So rather than just, you know, moving light to your talent, it's always fun to block your talent to come to the light, have dynamic movements and have the light change from one dim pink and blue kind of vibe to coming into this really warm tungsten household lamp feel. So that was something really fun. And then coming in on that tight shot when she's laying down there playing with it, you get this really nice catch light coming from this point source bulb. And essentially, to avoid it looking absolutely terrible, I took this light and just placed it in a way so it's still getting upstage. It was still kind of this diagonal direction and wrapping a little bit around her face, but then also placed it where you can get that catch light and placed her head, moved it around where you could get the catch light in her eye as well, creating a lot of this visual interest. But just like the last scene, that new aperture tube light, and brought it around to that shadow side, just to rake a little bit on her shadow side on frame right, and just create this little edge light on her shoulder and her hair. So essentially that's all that's kind of going on here. Like I said, it's looks complicated on the surface, but there's not a lot going on other than just filling in these colorful pools of light. So I'm gonna have to cut things short here. I hope that this was a fun, enjoyable video for you, and if so, you know, do me a favor and maybe hit that subscribe or like button. But without further ado, I'm going to cut this short and see you guys next time, and I hope that you have a fantastic night. Or day, I guess. I don't know where you are in the world or what time you're watching this at, but hey, have a good one.